Hello, my friends. Welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. If you're new here, I'm Lindy. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite fiction from 2022. Not necessarily published in 2022, but that's when I read it. I managed to narrow things down to 12 titles. I'm going to tell you about them in no particular order, except my very favorite. I'm saving that for last. But first, I'm going to tell you about my criteria and some things that I noticed when I was looking through my long list of 5-star reads from last year. Some of the common elements. I really appreciate deep, realistic characterization. I'm particularly looking for books about women or queer or people who aren't white or some combination of those three things. I'm looking for people who are different from me. I want to come away with a larger understanding of other people and myself. 3 of these books are in translation, and I think that's tied up with my desire to find characters who are different from me. Another thing that I'm looking for is a vivid setting. Often this is tied to descriptive language. When I look at the covers of my favorite books, I can feel that setting and the mood. It stays with me. Language is something that is so important to me. I am looking for word crafting. I'm looking for turns of phrase that delight and thrill me. I like experimental styles. 3 on this list are actually fiction, nonfiction hybrids. All of these books have arresting prose that makes me just stop and reread because I love language so much and I really appreciate when it's used well. These books tend to have a vision that conveys something important about the world, especially about the future. They're books that make me think. I like that. And books where I emerge changed from the reading experience. And I think that's about it. Oh, plot. I didn't mention plot. Well, I tend to be attracted to literary fiction, and the narrative arc is usually internal, so there is something happening, but usually more quietly than a plot-based novel. Oh, I also tend to prefer a slow to medium pace in the books that I read. Also, 2 out of these 12 titles are actually short story collections. I noticed that 3 out of the 12 titles that I'm going to tell you about today actually fit within some kind of subcategory, and they aren't the only books of that type that I gave 5 stars to this year. So I'm going to put up a little graphic to show you them surrounded by other similar titles that I also really enjoyed, because if you've read one of these, then you might like to try one of the others. And so in addition to the criteria that I've already mentioned, these books have got multiple story strands. They tend to include speculative elements. There tends to be some puzzle solving required, and they have global issues in them, important issues like environmental degradation and climate change and global pandemics and social inequity, stuff like that. So I will quickly mention some that didn't quite make the cut that are in this graphic. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. Thrust by Lidia Yuknavitch. I'm actually going to be talking about this one tomorrow on my Friday Reads. How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. And actually another one that's not pictured here is Migrations by Charlotte McGonigal. And then the previous year, I liked some other books that all fit within this same category, so I'll mention them too. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, The Actual Star by Monica Byrne, and Luckenbooth by Jenny Fagan. Okay, so on to my top reads now. Ali Smith, Companion Piece. I love everything Ali Smith writes. UK COVID-19 pandemic, a woman whose father is in the hospital for a heart ailment. He's in ICU, but she can't be with him because of the COVID restrictions, and people who she doesn't even remember from her past get entangled in her life, and there's someone from the far back, maybe medieval times, or actually maybe the future, who shows up. So this is a bit of a speculative element there. The language is just so playful, so humane, and the core of this book is about the importance of connections with each other, and it's a book I want to hug. Next up is My Volcano by John Elizabeth Stintzi. Weird, wonderful, wacky, and just so very good. It's like, what am I reading? I don't know, but I love it. And Pure Color by Sheila Heti. I had a similar reaction to that. At one point, this person has become a leaf on a tree. I mean, what? But it's exquisite. It is. It's a whole different way of looking at this world, and how maybe we could scrap it and start all over again. All right, now I'm going to call this category Most Unusual Point of View. I'm talking about Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. You've probably already heard this is experimental fiction. It's about a woman with terminal illness. Part of it is told from the viewpoint of cancer inside her body. It's got that combination of humor and tragedy that just gets me every time. Loved it. Next category, Best Mystery. Elena Knows by the Argentinian author Claudia Piñeiro, and this is translated by Frances Riddle. Elena, the central character, is an old woman with advanced Parkinson's, and the very short novel takes place over the course of one day, and it is so deeply feminist, and it's a perfect novel. Next category is Best Classic. It's actually a modernist novel, number 2 in the Alberta trilogy, and it is called Alberta and Freedom by Cora Sandel. I buddy read this with Marilyn Maya Mendoza. It's autobiographical. It was first published in 1931, but not translated into English until the 1960s. The translator is Elizabeth Rokkan. It's about an aspiring writer living penniless in Paris in the 1920s, and she totally rejects gender norms. This is her struggle for self-actualization. We really feel her interior life in this book. Very memorable character. I'm looking forward to the third in the series that I'm going to read next month. Next up, Best Translation in Audio Format. And this is The Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk, the Polish Nobel laureate. The book is translated by Jennifer Croft. The audiobook is read by the Israeli actor Gilli and the Jewish American actor Alan Lewis Rickman. I really like listening to long audiobooks. I find that the audio format helps me stick with a long novel. Now, this one is set in the 18th century in Europe during the Enlightenment, but we're also seeing the dark shadows that are cast by the Enlightenment. It's very feminist. It's got a huge cast of characters, and it is based on a real historical figure, Jacob Frank, but we see him from everybody else's point of view. Once again, this is a book that is going to stick with me for a long time. My next book is also in audio format. It is, overall, best audiobook, and that is The Colony by Audrey Magee. The narrator is the Irish actor Stephen Hogan, who, by the way, also did the narration for The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. So, The Colony, lots of people have talked about this book. You probably know it's set in 1979 on an island off the coast of Ireland where there's a small group of Irish speakers, and it's quite a bitter look at the effects of colonialism. One of the things that Magee does in this is, in between chapters, there are actual news reports of deaths that happened as a result of the Troubles. And one of the books that I already talked about has that similar structure as well, and that is John Elizabeth Stintzi's My Volcano. Next up, I have the category Best Fiction/Nonfiction Hybrid. It is a collection of short stories. Buffalo is the New Buffalo. It's by Chelsea Vowel, who is Métis. So this is indigifuturism. It's all speculative fiction. And after each short story, the author has a little essay talking about her inspiration for the story and explaining some of the points in it. So if you like to really think about what you read, this style is perfect. I really, really enjoyed it a lot. Next up, Best Short Story Collection, and that is Animal Person by Alexander MacLeod. Every single story in this collection is outstanding. They are stories about average Canadian people, and each one is like a gem with a memorable beginning, middle, and scene, whether it's two old ladies who figure out how to get what they want, to two young sisters who are in the water and they come into contact with a shark. The first story has a pet rabbit in it, and you know those intense moments, like when the guy goes to get the rabbit that's advertised. The fellow who's giving it away makes him swear that he's not going to eat the rabbit. No, he has to actually say the words, "We are not going to eat this rabbit." And, it's those kinds of little details that stick with you. Later on, they had to trim the rabbit's teeth in quite an interesting scene. So all of these sort of arresting moments, they're so specific that they become general about the texture of what our lives are like. I don't know how to talk about Animal Person except to say that you gotta check these out. Next category, Best Historical. The Sleeping Car Porter by Suzette Mayr. This book won Canada's Gilli Prize, very deserving. Suzette Mayr is a Black Canadian, and her character Baxter is a Black gay sleeping car porter. It's set in 1929. He's on a cross-Canada train that's a 4-day journey, and he's got to look after these passengers day and night, so he's not getting any sleep. And there's this sort of fugue of sleep deprivation that's all pervasive. And there's also a tension, because in order for Baxter to realize his immediate goal, which is to go to dental school, he's got to make enough money for his education. And any one of these white passengers can have him fired or have demerits. And yet Baxter's inner dignity is just so vivid as he's looking after this little girl so that her grandmother can sleep, and the girl is just clinging to him, so he gets even less sleep than he would have otherwise as he's looking after her. I love Baxter. This is a great, great story. And finally, overall, best book of 2022, and I just read it at the end of December, but this is definitely going to be on a prize list next year, and that is Fayne by Anne-Marie MacDonald. It is set in 19th century on the border between Scotland and England, and our central character is Charlotte. She's 12 at the start of the novel, and whoa, what a fascinating, scientific-minded girl who is determined to go to university and be a doctor. It's queer, it's Canadian, and go read it. So, those are my favorite books of 2022. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please, I want to hear what you've got to say about these titles that I chose, or about your favorite books from last year. And stick around. Tomorrow I'm doing my Friday reads. See you all soon.